At the dawn of the 20th century, the question of women's equality and whether women could take part in government alongside men was being hotly debated across the Western world. The working class women struggled for their rights, yet in every country there was a hindrance to the passing of laws that could recognize these rights. Socialists in North America insisted with demands for the vote of direct representation in the echelons of political power of that time. On the 28th of February 1909, the Women Socialists of the U.S.A. organized huge demonstrations and meetings all over the country demanding political rights for working women. This became the first Women's Day. In 1914, International Women's Day was held on March 8th in Germany, possibly because that day was a Sunday, and now it is always held on March 8th in all countries. Thereafter, from 1975, the United Nations began celebrating International Women's Day. In 1977, the United Nations General Assembly invited member states to proclaim March 8th as the UN Day for Women's Rights and World Peace. The women's movement in Uganda continues to grow tremendously and has realized a significant degree of progress in the redress of the wrongs and abuses society has systematically and inherently heaped on them. The Constitution of the Republic of Uganda of 1995 provides that women shall be accorded full and equal dignity of the person with men. It also accords vivid provisions for affirmative action, which has contributed to the increase in the number of women in leadership positions. Notwithstanding the numerous successes, the measures necessary, including adequate plans and budgets to ensure the implementation of national laws, policies and programs are limited. There is an outcry for several reforms required to address issues majorly on discriminatory laws, like that on marriage and divorce, because in the absence of such a law, protection of women will remain piecemeal and significant gaps will continue to exist. On this International Women's Day, NTV Uganda, in conjunction with the Uganda Human Rights Commission, bring to you this vital discussion about the progress made and the future hoped for the full realization of women's rights in Uganda. You're welcome.
Many movements of women really trying to come up to make sure that they propound a greater boost for the advancement of this cause. And it's a very huge history, spanning over 100 years, and this very movement started in 1909, okay, through a socialist push by the people in the communist setup of that particular generation in the USSR, and has spread over the span of years. And in 1977, the UN made sure that this day was made an international observable day. So, in partnership with the Uganda Human Rights Commission and here at NTV, let's discuss this matter and see the progress made, the challenges that we are still facing, of course, in the gender of women, and how we can make a better future for the female gender. Online, we have posted a question asking that, is this commemoration really important? And before I go straight into the discussion, let me make citation of some of your contributions, especially on Facebook. I can see Farid Jeluo, he says, rights, yes, but gender-based rights, no. Gender-based rights comes hand in hand with gender-based roles. It's only for the few bold women who actively take up roles and responsibilities claimed to have been for men. Then I have Ojok Anthony, who says, I'm not getting jealous, but the way women are being favored these days, in the next decade, we shall have so many NGOs campaigning for men's rights. And lastly, let me get Awol Babi Sharon, who says, why not necessary? Women are the men of today. Take a look at taxis in the morning at 5:30 a.m. and you see women and only two men. That's the driver and the conductor. Women toil to the end. Most of the men are busy in bars. All right, so let me get started into the studio here. I have a great panel of people who are grossly involved in this particular campaign area. And on my extreme left, I have Kamadi Bionabie, the Uganda Human Rights Commissioner, Director, Research, Education and Documentation. Kamadi, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
And in the middle, I have Ida Nachiganda, Uganda Human Rights Commission Director, Complaints, Investigations, and Legal Services.
Thank you, Baldwins.
You're welcome. So let me start with you, Kamadi, the man,
yes,
and perhaps we have a counter argument from the lady. So we have this history, and it's spanned over years. In Uganda, of course, it was there even before the time NRM came into power, because usually the narrative is that it's NRM which has boosted the campaign for women. But I am asking, isn't this campaign engagement really kind of defunct? It's no longer relevant, and it seems now it is a campaign to disempower men rather than actually to empower men. That's somehow the sentiment that is usually advanced by people who feel that this is an overextension of the campaign. It's no longer relevant.
Well, thank you very much. Depending on which angle you look at it from, I take note that people are entitled to their opinions, but those opinions sometimes have to be contextualized. The celebration of this day in support of women's rights, I should say, the UN you talked about earlier ago, when they were designating this day as International Women's Day, they added something which is usually forgotten or people don't talk about it. International Women's Day, and it is also looked at the day for international peace, implying women should live in a peaceful society as well. Commemoration of this day has not outlived its usefulness. The views held by some other people, like I said earlier on, notwithstanding. We live in a largely patriarchal society, and if you are not careful, you may keep women on the wall forever. Therefore, in my own view and on behalf of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, we strongly believe that yes, some strides have been made, positive strides, but a lot remains to be done. The society we live in, examples are abound on a daily basis of women dying on the hands of their husbands or boyfriends on account of a misunderstanding in a relationship. Yes, one will say women also kill some men, but when you look at the magnitude and the spread, the violence orchestrated by men on women so far outweighs what the ladies do. Two, in the area of, for instance, education, the statistics are abound. I may not have some of them off cuff here, but it's not uncommon for a family to take a decision that let us support this boy to go to school. The lady can go and get married after P7 or even before reaching P7. I have been recently trying to make a reflection of the ladies I started with in primary 1 and where they are. I'm at a loss. I know some, quite a number, left school in P5, in P7, in senior 1, and I'm sure that was not their intention to quit in primary 5, in senior 1, in P7, implying the challenge is still very much prevalent. When it comes to our cultures, ownership of property, the patriarchal setup within our society is to the effect that a man is superior to a woman. And that's why, for us from the human rights field, we go back to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 1, we are all born equal and free in dignity and rights. So there is an attitude challenge that we still have to address as a country, as villages, as organizations, as a society, that women are not secondary citizens. So from what we gather, this day is very, very important. And personally, I wouldn't like this day to be trivialized by people who think women should cook today. That's what I keep seeing, that today it is for
women or men?
Sorry, for men, men to cook. No, that is a narrow analysis of the issue, this day is critical to take stock of strides made, challenges being faced, and what should be the way forward by looking at economic, social, political, cultural aspects that impede the advancement of women as human beings.
Of course, it shouldn't underscore the fact that some women advance that same particular narrative that we need to be emasculated from the kitchen, from the house chores, which is definitely understandable, and then perhaps the roles should be reversed and the men should be doing that instead of us. But we are dealing with this entirely. And Ida, the constitution, the laws in Uganda, of course the constitution article 33, which we've been promoting here, makes it very clear that any particular contrary law or perhaps policy that does not give the empowerment to women or somehow disenfranchises them or disequalizes them against men should be quashed, and women should make sure that they are protected in that regard. And you have the Domestic Violence Act, you have the Prohibition of the Female Genital Mutilation Act, you have the Lands Act. All those particular laws give a certain degree of empowerment and equalization for women. So we need to understand from your point of view as the Uganda Human Rights Commission, what are the concrete achievements? Because we can keep being a talk public about this matter, but really nothing much is to show. So what has been achieved?
Baldwin's, you've said it all. The laws provide a foundation. We have the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the country, and it has articles in there, strong articles, Article 33 that you've just talked about, that prohibits any practice, any culture that marginalizes or causes violence against women is prohibited by the Constitution. That is a very strong provision. We have Article 34 that also further emphasizes the rights of women. We have the affirmative action provision in the Constitution, a very, very big foundation for women, the women movement in this country, where you best from to claim your rights, where you best from to hold government accountable where certain things have not been achieved. Then from the Constitution, we have the specific laws, as you've mentioned them. The Prohibition of Female Genital Mutilation Act, I think that was a big achievement in this country. Yes, it's a practice that is passed off as a cultural practice, but what effect is it having on the girls and the women that are being subjected to it? So it was contrary to the Constitution, so there had to be a law in place to criminalize it. And then
so is FGM completely dealt with, that the practice is no longer in existence?
Of course not, Baldwin's, as we've come to see, as we've
because
come
in
to know.
practice, that is the achievement that we want.
Yes.
You have the laws, but the actual results.
We've come to see and we've come to know that it is still happening. Young girls are being crossed over into Kenya for the practice to happen, but also it's still happening in the country. So then we need to reflect why we have these laws, the beautiful laws in place, the Anti-FGM Act, the Domestic Violence Act, and still we're still seeing these practices, these incidences against women. So it's not enough to have the laws in place. It's not enough to have the laws in place. We need to, the implementers of the laws, first of all, have to know the provisions of these laws so that they can effectively implement them. But my colleague talks about the issue of attitude, where we have a society, a patriarchal society, where we have a society where these cultural practices have been deeply rooted, then you need to address the attitudes of the population through massive sensitization and awareness to change the way people think, so that people can appreciate that you're trying to say, and they can change and they can stop doing it. So we have to apply a multi-pronged approach, not only have the laws in place and sit back. What about the implementers? What about the ones that are supposed to claim the rights? The women, society at large, do they know these laws? So that we can start seeing an achievement in as far as the implementation of the laws is concerned.
Besides the articulation of laws and the constitutional enshrinement of these particular requirements for making sure that women are protected, that they have an equal say in society, little has been realized, perhaps in summarization of what you said, that's what I'm getting. And I have to put it to you, Kamadi, that the human rights is in existence. So we're talking about it, okay? We're talking about this. And Uganda has ratified the African Charter of Human and People's Rights, the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women in Africa, which is the
Maputo Protocol.
Yes. But if she's saying that we're still languishing and having difficulties to be able to justify the existence of these laws, okay, the constitutional assertion that women should be equalized, then what is the responsibility of the Uganda Human Rights Commission in this particular regard? What exactly are you doing?
Well, like she has put it, everything starts with a foundation. So the laws you are quoting in place, that is starting point, because human rights...
But these are not establishments of the Uganda Human Rights Commission. You are supposed to be the watchdog for human rights protection in the country. So in line with women, what have you done?
That's what I was coming to. In recognition of the prevailing legal framework, the moment you have the legal framework, then you go to the institutional framework. Now, the institutional framework is Uganda Human Rights Commission as an institution. Within the commission, we do quite a number of things. We have a function to monitor the enjoyment of human rights. We have a function to receive complaints on human rights violations. We have a function to do sensitization, which we are doing here right now. So within the commission, we have put in place a special unit called the Vulnerable Persons Unit. And one of its areas of focus is women's rights. What have we done for women's rights? One of them is to sensitize men like you and many others out there who, some of whom think, like I said earlier on, women are secondary citizens. I will tell you, we traverse the country to sensitize people on human rights in what we call baraza, public meetings. We designed it as a strategy to reach out to the grassroots, to hear them, to first of all to sensitize them on their rights, hear their views, and solve their challenges, human rights concerns. Now, we used to receive almost only men, and then we realized there was a challenge. We discovered that some women had to get permission from their husbands to allow them to attend a public meeting, which might be okay if you are talking in a mutually in a manner of respecting each other. But if I allow you, you will go. If I don't, you will not go. Then you see that there is a challenge. So we have been conducting village meetings in the afternoons and a tree set up, because we realized the majority of the women are involved in domestic chores in the morning hours. So that is one way we have been able to reach out to women and actually deal with their human rights challenges. Majority of the women, we have documented cases of women who have children and the husbands are not looking after them. That is an affront to women's rights. The Constitution clearly provides for parents and the state to look after the children. But in most villages, societies, you find that it is the women looking after children by themselves. I'm responding to your issue. What has UHRC done?
Yes, and on that particular...
let me first mention this.
Just a minute, because I need to go for a break. Just a minute.
We have documented cases and actually helped women whose husbands have not been looking after children, child maintenance, a very great area. We have cases where women come to the commission to pick the school fees. They deposit it with the commission, and then because some of the relationships have completely broken down, either with the commission or through the banks, depending on the memorandum of understanding we usually reach with these women. That is just one component. I can see you want to go for a break. We shall add on.
Yes, because you didn't give me the answers at the very beginning of the submission. So let's go for a break and come back and deal entirely with the issues of affirmative action, the achievements. I need some kind of concrete achievements in general terms of how these particular women's rights have been advanced. And thanks to our viewers for keeping with us. We'll go for a break. We'll be right back. Cheers. Thanks our viewers for joining us back again. I'm Karaga Bodwins, coming to you live from the Serena International Conference Center, and we're discussing this contextual subject about the International Women's Day, the rights of women in Uganda, and pretty big buzz online and here in the studio. And we posted a question asking you about the relevance of this day and this commemoration, whether it's appropriate or rather it's still relevant for women to go up in arms or in public demonstrations to ask for these rights to be granted. And Ashraf Masruz says that if only someone volunteers to teach these rights to them, because the way women misuse the little rights they have, misinterpreting all of it in the bid to become men themselves, it's very confusing. And lastly, Dawn Inet says, no, it's not right. It's like healthy person fighting for oxygen. There is one thing women don't understand is that even when we get equal gender rights, men will never experience menstruation periods and even labor pain. That's how God created us, basically. This is what makes women think vulnerable in most cases. So, pardon over that for making, I was trying to judge whether I should mention that, but I think it's a normal issue. So Nachiganda. Yes. All right, so we have very innumerable challenges as women. You have, okay, domestic violence, sexual assaults, repressive and domineering cultures, polygamy, poverty, single parenting, labor payment inequality. So what is the strategy generally in the whole country, especially with government, to make sure that these issues are not dealt with to be redressed just by the campaigns or demonstration by women, but by being systematic and not only also concentrating on the text of the law, but being practical in making sure that this redress is undertaken?
Okay, let me start from what you said, being systematic, as in entrenching an intervention in the system. I will start with affirmative action. There's been a big debate about affirmative action.
Which we're going to actually debate.
Yes. And affirmative action was meant to see that we move in the right direction towards achieving gender equality in all aspects of life, political, social, economic. Let's talk about education, the 1.5. There's been a big debate that maybe it's time to stop the 1.5, the extra point at higher institutions of learning, because it seems more girls are being admitted into university than boys. And we look at enrollment of children in school, the initiatives that are being taken to see that more girls are being enrolled and retained in school at UPE and U.S.A. levels. We look at politics, how women are being facilitated to participate in politics right from the LC1 level up through to the parliamentary level. Big strides are being made. Composition of boards and commissions, there has to be a particular percentage of composition for women, and where it is not being reflected, there is an uproar usually. Why is it more men on that board than women? So that systematic intervention by government, I think, was a step in the right direction in terms of affirmative action. But the debate is, do we still need it? Do we still need affirmative action?
Yes, and let me just specifically bring in Kamada at this particular point. Because the politics of the affirmative action is also very, controversial in its own direction, besides what she is mentioning about the 1.5 points admission to campus. You have now about 13 cabinet ministers out of the 31 in composition of the executive branch. You have so many judges. You have 157 women representatives, of course 112 coming on affirmative action. And there is a critique. There's a lady called Winnie B. Watara submitted the 2018 paper in a journal for Public Policy Institute. And she says that women's increased role in formal politics in Uganda was brought about by power-seeking politicians who were sympathetic to feminist issues because electoral strategies are severely limited by liberal political and economic values, and politicians could secure support from women with low-cost symbolic political initiatives, meaning that the issue of affirmative action is simply symbolic in most of the cases. And lastly, she concludes by saying that she argues that women MPs do not represent women in parliament, they simply represent the state to the women, since the state deliberately creates new districts in a bid to increase number of seats. So it's a political gimmick to simply entrench actually those already well-entrenched men in power. What is your response to that argument?
Well, before I came here this morning, I was reading an article in the newspapers on what happened at Parliament yesterday. Some two MPs, one a woman and another a man, they were in disagreement as to whether this aspect we are talking about is still relevant. But going back to what you've just raised there and the spirit behind this affirmative action, which is manifested in the aspect of special interest groups for the case of Parliament, it was not meant to last forever. The constitution is very clear in as far as that aspect of special interest groups is concerned. We should be evaluating every after a given period of time whether we still need it or not. Because indeed the arguments have been made that there are those who think these women MPs benefit from the affirmative action as individuals, not representing women per se. There is that school of thought. There are those who think they have...
Is that school of thought wrong?
Well, it's not my duty to say it's wrong or right. In this discourse, it requires a scientific process. We may need to conduct a survey to actually get what is the actual situation on the ground and what are people feeling like. Otherwise, if it's
to the surprise that the Speaker of Parliament, who has been there for over 20 years, is having that seat on the basis of affirmative action programming, which sounds really quite strange.
She was arguing. Actually, she's one of the women MPs I was talking about, now that you have brought her out. You know, she becomes an MP before becoming Speaker. And her argument is that she traverses 4 constituencies to get votes, implying she does not come to Parliament on a silver plate that she has been favored because of affirmative action. Actually, in her view, getting votes from 4 constituencies in her district is quite cumbersome. Therefore, any insinuation that she's favored is, in her view, not right. And many others may have that kind of argument. But I think the critical point should be what do these women MPs do in the emancipation of women? I think the primary objective was not to help them as individuals, because apparently they represent a bigger constituency. And when you look at it critically, they are called the woman MP for the district. Now, in the district, we have men and women. Some people have argued that they do not actually represent women. That's why we need to do some review. Today is a public holiday here. In China, it's only for women. In Nepal, it's only for women, and other countries. So there are those who think if it's a Women's Day, it should be women only. Similarly, this affirmative action debate, I think it's high time we reviewed it to exactly see whether it's still relevant in specific cases ever since it was started. Okay. But going back to where it started from, in my own analysis and what we see at the Uganda Human Rights Commission, we are not yet there. But it may not be evenly applied. We may say in case of representation in parliament, maybe we don't need it. We may say in the case of 1.5 to advance girls' education, it is still relevant. So we need to look at it based on different ingredients.
Okay, so let's go for the thanks for that submission. Let's go to the specifics. Ida, the access to justice. The 2017 Women's Access to Justice in Uganda report states that women face institutional barriers from geographically distant justice service locations and technically complex justice procedures to discriminatory attitudes based on deeply entrenched male bias at all levels of the legal system. So how is this being dealt with so that it can be reversed? So that, because I can understand the impediment for any human being to get justice, that is a total non-starter for existing and enjoying human rights, or enjoying your citizen rights as a person in that country. So what is being done to make redress to this, and is UHRC involved in any of those efforts?
Challenges in access to justice for women are real. They cannot easily access courts. I wanted to give you a practical example. At the commission, like my colleague said, we receive complaints of alleged human rights violations. When it comes to the end of the year, we collect statistics on how we have fared in the year. And it has been consistent that more men lodge complaints at the commission than women. 2018, we had about 500 men lodging complaints at the commission as compared to 238 women. That's about a 60%, 30% dynamic. So there are so many hurdles that women have to jump to actually access institutions that dispense justice. Resources, not having access to resources, the patriarchal society that we're talking about, a woman is not supposed to talk, a woman is not supposed to do anything, so they would prefer to keep quiet with whatever problem they have. But that means then that institutions in place like ours, like courts of law, then have to take extra interventions, have to come up with unique methods of seeing that even this vulnerable group of people, women, children, persons with disabilities, have access to justice. At the commission, we've come up with what we call mobile complaints handling clinics. This means that we don't sit back and wait for them to lodge the complaints. We are now going into communities and setting camp there and allowing them the opportunity to come and tell us their problems, and if they are indeed human rights violations, we register them. We've seen with courts of law, in November 2018, I recall reading in the media, there was a special intervention by courts, the High Court, to handle cases of sexual gender-based violence. And I think that was good in as far as handling them and also reducing the backlog when it comes to these cases. With police, we've seen they have a special unit for handling sexual gender-based violence cases. They also go out into the communities in terms of community policing. So it needs a special intervention. It needs I don't want to say affirmative. It needs affirmative action by institutions to see that we reach out to women who have been marginalized. But allow me to veer off course a bit. You know, I'm a woman. I'm a woman. And you are reading comments made by the public on social media. I'll comfortably say the word menstruation. And I'm going to contextualize it. That when a girl in primary school starts their menstruation, there are so many challenges that she faces. She doesn't have access to sanitary pads, but not only that, stigmatization in the school. So she would now prefer to keep at home because of menstruation. Early and forced marriages have meant that girls are now getting pregnant while they're in school. And this means that if I get pregnant, I have to now drop out of school, and my peers who I started school with are continuing with their studies. So these are practical challenges that the girl child is facing, and I think we need to address our minds too, holistically. Yes.
Yeah, all right. For sure, it's a massive challenge. I have a daughter, so I fully understand. I'm bracing myself for those challenges. I'm praying that she'll be comfortably taken care of to deal with that. So, come on, just before we go for a break, we're talking about now specifics, and the issue of education is profoundly very critical in addressing this equalization campaign. Uganda is ranked as #1 in primary education enrollment, usually in Africa. But as we get to secondary school, it is ranked in enrollment in secondary school for girls. It's ranked in 127 against the other countries, which is about 187 countries. In the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap 2017 report scorecard that enumerated this particular discrepancy. Why, besides the biological issues as we're talking about menstruation, why is this pattern continuing for a long period of time that young girls are not making it to higher levels of education other than primary school?
It goes back to the first question you asked. Is the commemoration of this day still relevant? I'm happy you're quoting statistics which make it extremely relevant. And it is, in my view, deeply grounded in the patriarchal nature of our society. Why should it be girls to drop out and not men? One, early and forced marriages is one of the challenges we are facing. And as Uganda Human Rights Commission, all we can do is to sensitize people, make sure they change their attitude, make sure that they know that a girl is important when she's educated like a man. And we are actually having a deliberate program of sensitizing communities where early and child forced marriages is a challenge. I'm made to understand Moro district ranks highest in this vice in this country, but also it is prevalent in West Nile, it's prevalent in the western, it is almost everywhere in the country, in the eastern, in Mbale, Ale. You know, we have also found out through our work that when parents give away these children before they are of age, they fear because there is the loan defilement. And some of them are aware. So they exchange, they give away the girls, and then on a market day, they go to the market with the cows under the guise of buying and selling. In essence, they are fulfilling the other marriage which was secretly conducted. So it is that challenging. So the issue of early and child marriages is one of the reasons girls are not making it. The other one is what she has just mentioned. It might be a walkover for girl children from well-to-do families where the issue of sanitary pads is not a problem. But in rural areas and hard-to-reach places, this is one of the factors that make the girl child abandon school. Yeah. We have also a challenge of sexual harassment. Somebody made a statement that it is, which of course is subjective, that sometimes beautiful ladies cannot perform very well because they don't have time to concentrate. The entire society is on them. Teachers at school, borders on the road, you know, it diverts their attention. That is also a challenge. So
it's actually related to sexual violence.
Exactly. Actually, in 2018, we conducted a survey as a commission on violence against children, and the statistics were alarming. How many girls are defiled every day, sexually harassed. So these are aspects we would like stakeholders to take note of and don't relax.
Yes.
And that is the importance of today. Let us reflect. Let us reflect, change our attitudes, come up with measures that seek to address these challenges.
Absolutely. And just as we are wrapping up, I'm going to go for a break. Come back and talk about the issue of economic empowerment, just as we are wrapping up.
Okay.
Economic empowerment and obviously the issue of, is this a gender antagonistic or a fight of gender antagonisms? And how do we move forward? Thanks our viewers for keeping with us. Go for a break and we'll come back to wrap this up. And thanks our viewers for continuing with us. I'm Karaga Bodwins. We are discussing the status of our women's rights in this country and for the progress made and what needs to be bettered. And online we've asked a question, another question. What do you think women should do, and men of course, in making sure that the status of women in society and girls is bettered? And Kasozi Arnold says that stay in school and work hard, not putting all their hopes in men, as many women do. Okay, they need to work twice as hard as men as well, so that they realize their full potential. If it's work, work. Then I have Asifwe Daniel says that respect themselves, forget about men, and join politics. And lastly, Nangovi Rukaya, she says that it all starts with parenthood. Let them get raised in directions of political, social, economic, and other aspects of life. This creates self-belief, independence, and having passion in their daily chores. Not able to quote from Twitter, but please continue with the conversation running down as we wrap it up here. So Ida, one of the fundamental issues, and actually the very foundation for this particular movement in the socialist era of the U.S.A. when they started up this movement, was economic empowerment, industrial placement, to make sure that there's equalization of labor payment. What needs to be done to continually improve the economic empowerment of women, besides being in the political sector, being helped out in the health sector and in the education sector? Economic empowerment, because you can see that, you know, women literally constitute 84% of the dominant economic sector, which is agriculture, and yet they are really dismally being paid, and they spend over 3 hours a day on house chores. That is a report done by Action Aid, in contradistinction with men who have less of that time. So what needs to be done?
Okay, let me start from our earlier discussion, aspect of education. Education provides a foundation. It gives you a level of independence. I believe I am what I am today because my parents invested in my education. I am free to make whatever decision I want as regards my destiny. Let's go to access to resources. And specifically, let's talk about access to land, because you've given that statistic on the fact that it is women most that are using the land today, but they don't own it.
Yes.
So let's put in place systems that ensure ownership of land for women, because land is the key to economic empowerment. We talk about the workplace. There are so many challenges women face. We've talked about sexual harassment. Let's talk about something like maternity leave, that if I am pregnant and I am about to give birth and it's time for me to go and give birth, I don't lose my job, because if I lose my job, that means that I'm not able to look after myself, look after my family, but also better myself. So things like maternity leave that are entrenched in our laws should be respected. Healthcare, if I am sick, I should be able to access healthcare, so that I do not fall sick and eventually maybe die, or I don't fall sick and I can't look after my family, I can't be involved in productive activities. Participation at all levels, political, economic, social. Let's see more women participating in politics. Let's see more women participating in economic activities, so that we can achieve economic empowerment. Let me end by talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. It is the trending topic right now, because it is what is leading the development agenda in this world. So SDG 5 is about gender equality. We have integrated, as Uganda, we've integrated the Sustainable Development Goals in our National Development Plan. So if SDG 5 on gender equality is among the goals, that means that as sectors, ministries, departments, agencies, local governments, we need to have in place interventions in our work plans, in our budgets, on how we are going to ensure economic empowerment of women under SDG 5. So we're going to put in place interventions that are going to ensure that women have more access to resources, that women are able to better themselves and also contribute to the economic development of their country.
Of course, it's the general context of the economy, because you have a very terrible credit provision system. You have a very poorly functioning economy in many regards, especially inflation, counterfeit, with so many things. So it's not exclusive. The economic disempowerment is not exclusive, I guess, to women. Kamadi, just as we are running down this particular discussion, you know, there's a village in Kenya called Umoja Village. Don't know whether either you've heard about it, where women have exclusively cordoned off a certain area, and it's a female-only area. Okay, they don't even permit men, they don't permit girls. Of course, it has a history for that. And there's a certain degree of extremism by some women, okay, I'm not going to use the term feminism, that can actually frighten the man, and it feels like this is now a gender antagonistic kind of warfare. All right? How should women get to make sure that they rationally and properly advance the need for us to have an equalized society without necessarily coming out as enemies of men?
Well, thank you very much. Move from Kenya and come back home here. You may not be aware also there is an island in Lake Victoria, one of the islands which form Buvuma district, called Luwero. It is also exclusively for men. Women don't step there. So those are two extreme cases. To the extent that a woman may move parliament to campaign, the men have to first come from the island, and then she meets them from somewhere else. Those are two extreme ends. Now, let me go to what maybe we should also have started with. Human rights are entitlements which are accrued to everyone by virtue of being a human being. And under Article 20 of our Constitution, human rights are not granted by the state or any authority. They are God-given, they are inherent, we are born with them. Article 21 talks about equality and non-discrimination, and that is the gist. And the discrimination which is prohibited on all accounts, age, tribe, political ideology, name it, but also gender is one of the aspects on which discrimination is bad. Therefore, like the saying goes, too much of anything is always bad. Those who are advocating for the rights of men, rights of women, should understand that human rights are interdependent and interrelated. You are not going to have a situation where you have rights for one group or category of people independent of the other. So it's a mistake to think that we are women, let us cordon off Umoja, we are men, let's cordon off Luwero, and you think you will succeed. Not at all. Let us appreciate the biological roles played by both men and women. We need each other. So it's not right for women to gang up against men. Neither is it right for men to gang up against women. Therefore, what do we need to do? People have misunderstood the concept of gender to think that it means women. No, it's about roles played by men and women in society. Therefore, let us be respectful of each other. We should take it from the obligation of equality and non-discrimination in order not to discriminate against each other on the basis of gender or any other ground really. And that whole thing requires mindset change. We have men in this country who think women should not own land, should not own property. Why? Because they think we are men, and for you go and get married, get away out of here. So this kind of discrimination manifests itself in so many ways. But the other thing that I think is lacking in society, is to know that human rights are enjoyed in tandem with the duties and responsibilities. If you are a woman, what are your duties and responsibilities? Where your rights stop is where other people's rights begin. If you are a man, what are your duties and responsibilities? So let's not talk about human rights at face value. Let us understand what are our duties and responsibilities. And if that is done, we shall have a stable society, we shall have peace, where everybody live in harmony.
Yes, thank you, Kamali. And let me give the last word to Ida. So, International Women's Day, you've been spectacular on this particular discussion. Just give your last word, and definitely how people should relate with UHRC, Uganda Human Rights Commission. But yeah, talk to the women just in a minute, then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, thank you, Baldwin, and thank you, NTV, for this discussion. I want to say that women's rights are human rights, as Mrs. Hillary Clinton said. Let's not look at women's rights as some alien subject. We are talking about women's rights because, like my colleague has said, all human beings are entitled to rights. Women, children, persons with disabilities. So women's rights are human rights. It's not a strange subject matter. It's not an alien subject matter. It's something that is here with us and that we need to address. I would like to urge women to make use of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, attend our educational activities, attend our baraza meetings, attend our community meetings, lodge complaints at the Uganda Human Rights Commission. We are here to serve you, and we are here to ensure that you receive the justice you deserve. And allow me to also say Happy Women's Day to my fellow women out there. I hope you enjoy your day, and the struggle continues.
Thank you indeed. Very explicitly and concisely said, and I believe impactful. And thanks, Ida Nachiganda, UHRC Director, Complaints, Investigations and Legal Services, and Mr. Kamadi Bionabi, second time to hosting you here. UHRC Director, Research, Education and Documentation.
It's a pleasure.
You've been prolific in the discussion, and I believe you added great value to the audience in this particular matter of concern to this nation. And thanks our viewers for keeping with us. Please, if you're out there and you're a government ministry, department, agency, or an NGO or a corporate institution, and you want to have a customized discussion about an issue that is of grave concern to this nation, please come talk to our general manager, talk to me, talk to our sales department, and we shall have this done very beautifully. Please have a great International Women's Day. Happy Women's Day to all our women here at NTV, at home, our girlfriends, our daughters, and our sisters. God bless.